The old Whitmore building had been abandoned for decades, but the stairwell, the cursed stairwell, was the true heart of its darkness. Locals whispered about people who entered and never returned, about screams echoing from below when the wind was still, and shadows that moved of their own accord. Jamie had always been skeptical, brushing off the stories as urban legends. But curiosity had a way of overriding caution, and tonight, armed with a flashlight and a camera, he was determined to see the truth for himself. The main door groaned as he pushed it open, the rusty hinges shrieking against the quiet night. Dust motes danced in the flashlight's beam, and the air smelled of mold, decay, and something heavier, like iron, like blood. The building was silent except for the echo of his footsteps on the cracked tiles, but as soon as he stepped toward the stairwell, a chill settled over him, heavy and suffocating. The stairs descended into darkness, each step blacker than the last, as if swallowing the light. A faint whisper echoed up from below, too soft to make out, but unmistakably a voice. Jamie swallowed hard and started his descent. Each step groaned under his weight, and the walls seemed to narrow around him, pressing in, twisting. The flashlight flickered, casting long, jagged shadows that moved independently of the stairs. He stopped mid-step. A faint scraping echoed from the lower levels. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. He could feel it following him, measuring him. The hair on his arms stood on end, and his breath came out in small, visible clouds. Halfway down, he saw them. Shadows at the edge of the stairs. Thin, elongated, unnaturally tall, stretching impossibly toward him. Faces hidden, but Jamie felt their eyes, countless eyes, watching, hungry. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, chanting words he didn't understand at first, until he realized they were calling his name. Jamie, Jamie, don't leave. Panic surged through him. He forced himself forward, one trembling step at a time. The stairwell seemed endless, twisting unnaturally. Every step brought new horrors. A figure darted across the steps ahead, small, hunched, its movements jerky, like it was breaking through space itself. Jamie's camera caught it for a fleeting moment. Pale skin, hollow eyes, fingers too long, dragging along the wall. He blinked, and it was gone. The whispers grew into low laughter, then screams, then silence, before resuming again in distorted, overlapping layers. Suddenly, the walls began to drip. Black liquid seeping down, smelled like iron, like blood. The stairs warped beneath him, some planks bending, others missing entirely. Jamie stumbled, barely catching himself. The shadows stretched higher, forming figures that moved closer, their whispers and laughter merging into a cacophony that made his head spin. Something brushed against his arm, cold, wet, and firm. He spun, flashlight swinging wildly, but nothing was there. Only the darkness and the whispers remained. He reached a landing halfway down and paused, heart hammering. A door, cracked and hanging on its hinges, led into a small, dark room. Compelled, he pushed it open. Inside, a circle of faded chalk on the floor caught his attention. Symbols, twisted and malformed, covered the walls. The shadows gathered here, thicker, more tangible, stretching toward him with slow, deliberate movements. Whispers formed into words. "You belong here. Stay with us." Jamie backed away, tripping down the stairs. The building seemed alive. The stairwell twisted, turned, and descended farther than it physically should. Each step echoed, but it wasn't his echo. Other footsteps, heavy and dragging, joined him. The figures closed in, their elongated limbs reaching, brushing his shoulders, arms, legs. He screamed, running, stumbling, camera swinging, capturing glimpses of grotesque faces, children, adults, some burned, some broken, all watching, waiting. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a black void. He couldn't see the floor, only endless darkness. The shadows surged forward, pressing, their whispers sharp, demanding, pleading. Jamie's flashlight flickered, revealing the tallest figure, featureless, faceless, limbs impossibly long, and it stepped closer, faster than possible. He ran toward it, feeling the air thicken, pressure building in his chest. A hand shot out from the shadows, cold, firm, wrapping around his wrist. Another touched his shoulder. He stumbled, falling into the void below, or so it seemed. Screams erupted around him, layered as if hundreds of voices were trapped in the walls, trapped in the stairs, trapped in the darkness itself. Jamie scrambled forward, dragged down by unseen hands, until finally his fingers found a railing. He pulled himself up, dragging toward the faint glow above, the exit. The stairwell stretched one last time. Shadows lunged, figures screaming, whispering, laughing. He ran faster, heart hammering, lungs burning, ignoring the stabs of pain in his legs and arms. The faint glow of moonlight filtered through broken windows above. He reached the last step, leapt, and tumbled out onto the cracked pavement outside. The stairwell groaned behind him, as if alive, a deep, echoing sigh vibrating through the building. Jamie collapsed, gasping, shaking, camera still recording. The building loomed behind him, silent, yet he could feel the presence inside, watching, waiting. Shadows flickered in the broken windows. The whispers were gone, or maybe they were just hiding, patient, knowing he had escaped this time. Lightning illuminated the stairwell for a brief second. Jamie froze. The tallest figure, faceless limbs stretching impossibly, stood at the top of the stairs, motionless, staring. It raised one elongated hand in a slow wave. Jamie didn't move. The wind carried a faint whisper. "We'll wait. We always wait. You'll come back." He stumbled away, never looking back, the stairwell swallowed by shadows once more, alive, hungry, cursed. The old Westbrook Mental Hospital had been abandoned for decades, yet its walls still seemed to breathe, exhaling the memories of pain, despair, and madness. Outside, the fog clung to the cracked pavement like ghostly fingers, swirling around the broken gates as if warning anyone who dared approach. Mason had heard the rumors, the whispers of patients who never left, of screams that echoed through the empty halls, of shadows moving in the corners of locked wards. But Mason wasn't looking for ghost stories. He was looking for proof. The moment he stepped into the hospital's main entrance, a chill ran through his spine, colder than any autumn night he had ever experienced. The door groaned behind him, closing with a heavy thud that echoed through the empty lobby. The air smelled of decay and something more pungent, antiseptic mixed with rot, a reminder of the building's horrific past. Mason clicked on his flashlight and lifted the camera. Every surface was coated in dust, every window shattered, and the walls were streaked with blackened watermarks that looked like tears. He moved down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under each step. The sound was deafening in the oppressive silence, echoing off the walls as if amplified by invisible ears. In the distance, a faint sound of scratching drew his attention. He froze. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by a low moan, a patient's voice, twisted and broken, though no one was visible. Mason whispered into his camera, "I'm inside Westbrook Hospital. They say the spirits of the patients linger, and they're not friendly." He reached the first ward, Ward B, the infamous section where the most disturbed patients had been kept. The door hung slightly open, swinging slowly, though there was no breeze. Mason's heart pounded as he pushed it forward. Inside, the walls were scrawled with messages in jagged handwriting. "Don't leave. Stay forever. Help me." The floor was littered with broken furniture and rusted instruments. As he stepped in, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the walls. Mason spun, flashlight trembling, but no one was there. Only the whispers continued, circling him, chanting in low, dissonant tones. As he advanced deeper into the ward, he noticed the patients' old beds arranged as if recently slept in. Shadows moved beneath the sheets, rising and falling like breathing forms. Mason's stomach twisted as he realized the shadows were stretching, elongating toward him with every step he took. A sudden cold gust blew through the room, and a faint, high-pitched scream echoed from somewhere deep within the hospital. He ran toward it, each footstep met with a chorus of moans, whispers, and the scraping of unseen nails across the floor. He reached the therapy room, the floor sticky with old stains and photographs of long-dead patients pinned to the walls. One photograph fell to the ground with a wet thud, an image of a woman with hollow eyes, staring directly at him. The lights flickered, and in the brief illumination, Mason saw shadows dart behind the doorframes. He felt a hand brush against his shoulder, icy and firm, but when he spun around, nothing was there. Only the laughter of children, or was it adults twisted and broken, echoed from the corridor, overlapping with faint cries for help. The next hall was darker, the paint peeling from the walls in large, curling strips. The floor sagged in places, groaning under his weight. Mason's flashlight caught a glimpse of something moving, tiny figures, small and thin, running across the far end of the corridor. Their faces were hidden in shadows, but he could feel their eyes, hundreds of them, staring, tracking his every movement. The whispers grew louder, frantic, pleading, accusing. Mason's heartbeat raced. "This place, it's alive," he muttered under his breath. He entered the main ward, the infamous area where experiments had been conducted. The air smelled of burnt chemicals and wet concrete. Chains hung from the walls, and the faint smell of blood lingered. The shadows coalesced in the center of the room, forming a mass that seemed to pulse and breathe. Mason tried to back away, but his feet felt rooted, glued to the floor. A figure emerged. Tall, distorted, its face obscured, eyes black voids that seemed to swallow the light. It lifted a hand, pointing directly at him, and the whispers sharpened into clear words. "Stay with us, forever." Mason bolted, breaking the spell that held him. The corridor stretched endlessly, far longer than it should have been. Doors slammed in his path, windows shattered, and chains rattled across the halls. Shadows reached out from the walls, grasping for him, their cold fingers grazing his skin. He ran faster than ever before, the whispers chasing him, screaming his name in 1,000 voices at once. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a small child. Its face burned and twisted, mouth open in a silent scream. It pointed down the hallway, urging him onward. Finally, Mason reached the main exit. The gates were closed, rusted, yet they swung open as if moved by invisible hands. Rain poured from the sky, soaking him to the bone, but he didn't stop. He pulled the gates closed behind him, collapsing to his knees in the mud, gasping for air. Behind him, the hospital stood silent, but the shadows lingered in the windows, watching. The whispers faded, but one last voice called out, carrying on the wind, "You can't leave. You're one of us now." Mason looked back once more. In the faint glow of the lightning, he saw dozens of figures at the windows, all staring, all waiting, all hungry. And somewhere deep inside the bowels of Westbrook, the distorted figure with hollow eyes smiled. Mason had escaped, for now, but the hospital never forgot. It never let go. And the next brave soul who entered would find the corridors alive once more, filled with whispers, shadows, and a hunger that could never be sated. The wind howled through the broken windows of St. Helena's abandoned school, carrying with it the faint scent of mold and ash. Rain pounded against the roof, leaking through the gaps in the walls, creating puddles that reflected the jagged shards of glass scattered across the floors. Aisha tightened her grip on the flashlight, its beam slicing through the suffocating darkness of the hallway that stretched endlessly ahead of her. She had come here searching for a story, for footage that would prove the rumors true. But as soon as she stepped inside, she felt a cold weight settle on her chest, pressing her lungs, making each breath an effort. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant drip of water and the occasional creak of the rotting floorboards beneath her feet. Every step she took echoed unnaturally, like the building itself was listening, measuring her, waiting. The walls, once painted a cheerful yellow, were now mottled with black streaks, scorched and peeling, marked with claw-like scratches that seemed fresh despite years of neglect. Shadows pooled in corners and under the shattered lockers, twisting unnaturally as if they were alive, stretching toward her every time she turned her head. Her flashlight flickered, and she cursed under her breath, smacking it against her palm until it steadied again, revealing the hallway ahead. At the far end, the gym doors gaped open, a black maw into the depths of the school's past. She forced herself forward, camera in hand, narrating into the microphone. "I'm inside St. Helena's school. It's been abandoned for over 20 years, but people say it's haunted. 6 children died here in a fire. Or so the story goes. Tonight, I'll see for myself." Her words bounced off the walls, sounding hollow and wrong. She paused as the air grew inexplicably colder, her breath forming ghostly clouds that seemed to linger far too long. A faint tapping echoed down the corridor, light and rhythmic at first, then louder, heavier, like footsteps following her pace. Aisha froze. The sound stopped. Then came a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. Aisha. Her name, but drawn out, warped, unfamiliar. She spun, flashlight slicing the darkness, but there was nothing. Only the walls stared back, stained and cracked, their shadows dancing in the pale light. She swallowed hard and pressed on, each step slower, hesitant, feeling the weight of unseen eyes tracking her every movement. The gym loomed closer. Its doors creaked as if sighing, inviting her to enter, warning her away at the same time. Inside, the gym smelled of smoke and rust. The floor was warped and blackened, scorched in places from the fire decades ago. At the far end, a stage was barely visible beneath the wreckage. A pale, flickering light glimmered from the curtains. Aisha stepped closer, drawn by it despite herself. She could feel the hairs on her arms standing on end, the air pressing against her skin like cold fingers. The curtain shivered, and a soft giggle echoed, a child's laugh, distorted and hollow, bouncing off the walls. Her heart thumped in her chest like a hammer. She raised the flashlight, the beam trembling as it cut across the stage. Nothing. Then a black silhouette moved behind the burnt piano. She gasped, stumbling backward. The piano keys pressed down by themselves, producing a single shrill note that made her ears ring. The figure advanced, tall and thin, its limbs impossibly long, dragging across the floor without making a sound. Its face was featureless, pale, and stretched as if the fire had melted it into something unnatural. The children in the photographs I had seen earlier, their charred faces frozen in horror, haunted her thoughts. I remembered the stories. Those children never left. Something had claimed them, and maybe now it wanted her too. She ran from the gym, her boots splashing through puddles, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Doors slammed behind her, lockers rattled, and whispers followed her through the hallways, growing louder with each step. "Don't leave, stay." The words echoed in her mind, overlapping with the sounds around her until she could barely tell what was real. Her camera swung wildly in her hands, capturing brief glimpses of shadows, of tiny figures darting just out of the beam's reach, of eyes staring at her from cracks in the walls. The school was alive, breathing, feeding off her fear. In the East Wing, she stumbled into a classroom that survived the fire mostly intact. Tiny desks, blackboards, and charred textbooks littered the floor. A message scrawled across the board in fresh chalk made her stomach turn. "You can't leave." She spun around. The chairs began to move, slowly at first, then violently, arranging themselves into neat rows as if waiting for an invisible class. The air grew heavier. Cold fingers brushed her neck, her hair, her arms. She screamed, dropping the camera as the room filled with a chorus of whispers, sobs, and laughter all at once. She scrambled toward the hallway, but the corridor seemed extremely far. The walls pulsed, breathing, closing in, elongating unnaturally. The exit she had passed just moments ago now appeared impossibly far. Shadows lunged from the walls, snapping at her heels. A flickering light revealed a small figure in the distance, a child with hollow eyes and a burnt smile. It pointed at her. "Come," it whispered. Her legs burned as she ran, the echoes of her own footsteps chasing her, mingling with the laughter, the whispers, the cries of the children who had died here. She reached the gym again, doors wide open as if inviting her back in. The same figure from before now stood at the far end, watching, waiting. It moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance in an instant. Aisha stumbled backward, tripping over debris, the flashlight skidding across the floor. The figure was upon her, and she felt an icy grip close around her wrist, pulling her down, pressing her to the cold, burnt floorboards. The whispers grew louder, chanting her name, surrounding her from every direction. Suddenly, a tiny hand tugged at her sleeve. She looked up. Mia, the child who had disappeared years ago, long thought lost, stood there, tears streaming down her blackened cheeks. "Run!" she screamed. Aisha seized the hand and ran, dragging the small figure behind her. The walls groaned and shifted, reaching for them with jagged, shadowy limbs. Every door slammed in her face, every hallway twisted. The rain outside beckoned, a distant promise of escape. They burst through the main entrance into the stormy night. Lightning illuminated the building, revealing it as a hulking monstrosity, more alive than abandoned. Aisha's lungs burned, her heart pounded, her camera dangling from her shoulder, capturing every moment. The whispers continued from within, echoing through the night. "Don't leave, never leave." But the distance grew with each step. She didn't look back. She wouldn't. The shadows remained trapped inside, forever hungry, forever watching. Finally, she collapsed on the wet ground, the camera still recording, capturing the silhouette of the school, the dripping rain, and the darkness within. Mia held her hand tight, whispering, "We're safe. For now." But the final shot on the camera, flickering in static, revealed a shadowed figure in the doorway watching them, smiling, waiting. Aisha knew, even as the storm raged, that the school would never let them go completely. It would always be hungry, always waiting, always watching. The old Thompson mansion had stood abandoned for decades, its brick walls weathered and cracked, the windows boarded up with splintered wood. But the basement, the shadowed basement, was rumored to be the heart of the house's darkness. Locals whispered about people who entered and never returned, about screams that echoed through the streets on windless nights, about a presence that waited beneath the floorboards. Jordan, curious and reckless, had always laughed at these stories, convinced they were just local legends meant to scare children. Until tonight. He pried open the creaking front door, flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. The mansion smelled of rot, mildew, and a faint tang of rust. Every step on the decaying wooden floor echoed through the cavernous house, swallowed quickly by the oppressive silence. The stairs leading to the basement loomed ahead, disappearing into darkness so thick it seemed to devour the light of his flashlight. A shiver ran down his spine as he descended, each step groaning under his weight, the air growing colder with every movement downward. It was as if the basement itself was breathing, waiting. Halfway down, the flashlight flickered violently. For a brief second, he thought he saw a shadow moving behind the stair railing, a figure, tall and thin, stretching impossibly. But when the light steadied, there was nothing. Only the smell of damp earth and old stone pressed against his nose. He whispered to the camera, trying to steady his shaking voice. "I'm in the Thompson house basement, and I don't like it. This place... something is down here." The basement was larger than he expected. Cracked concrete walls, piles of discarded furniture and broken boxes lined the edges. The air was thick, heavy, and impossible to breathe fully. As he stepped further in, the sound of dripping water echoed around him, but it wasn't coming from any visible source. Then he heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping, like fingernails on wood. Tap, 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 growing louder, circling him. He spun, flashlight darting, but nothing. Only shadows stretched across the walls, twisting and moving unnaturally. A sudden cold gust blew past him, carrying whispers that made his skin crawl. "Stay, stay with us," they called. He froze, the hairs on his arms standing, and a faint silhouette appeared at the far corner of the room. A figure, tall and thin, stretching impossibly, but its face was obscured by shadow, but he felt its gaze piercing through him. The flashlight flickered again, and for an instant the figure vanished. Only the whisper remained, growing louder. "You are late." Jordan's heart raced. He moved deeper, camera recording every shaky step as the floor beneath him seemed to shift. Boxes tipped over by themselves, furniture slid silently across the concrete floor, and a low hum filled the air, a vibration that resonated deep within his chest. The shadows at the walls thickened, forming shapes of children and adults, all with hollow eyes, all reaching for him. The whispers became screams, overlapping with laughter and sobbing. He stumbled backward, nearly falling, and the flashlight beam caught a glimpse of something crawling out from under a broken staircase. A small hand, pale, fingers elongated, reaching toward him. Panic gripped him. He turned to run, but the basement had transformed. The walls stretched, the ceiling lowered, and the stairwell he came down from had vanished. Every corner he turned, more shadows emerged, gliding silently, eyes glowing faintly. A voice, deep and hollow, resonated from the darkness. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." The words pressed against him like physical weight. The air grew icy, his breath visible in the faint light, as unseen hands brushed against his arms and shoulders. The shadows moved closer, more tangible, forming figures with twisted faces and elongated limbs reaching with sharp, grasping fingers. In the center of the basement, a circle of faint light appeared. Jordan approached cautiously, drawn against his will. Inside the circle lay old photographs, yellowed with age, showing the previous owners of the mansion, each one distorted, faces melted, eyes hollow, mouths twisted into silent screams. And beneath them, a message etched into the concrete floor: "Everyone stays forever." He stumbled backward, tripping over debris, and the circle of light expanded, enveloping him in its cold glow. The shadows coalesced into a towering figure, limbs stretched impossibly long, and it stepped toward him without sound. His legs burned as he ran, darting around corners, ducking under beams, trying to escape the basement that now seemed infinite. Doors slammed in his face, stairwells twisted into dead ends, and the air vibrated with whispers, screams, and laughter simultaneously. His flashlight skittered across the floor, illuminating fleeting glimpses of small figures darting between the shadows. Children burned and twisted, staring with hollow eyes. Finally, he reached what looked like the exit, a rusted metal door, chained and locked. He yanked at the chains, panicked as the shadows closed in. As he pulled, the chains fell away, the door swinging open as if by unseen hands. He bolted into the rain-soaked night, his heart hammering, lungs burning. Behind him, the basement loomed, silent once more, yet alive, watching, waiting. Lightning illuminated the windows, revealing dozens of figures pressed against them, staring, waiting, their mouths open in silent screams. Jordan didn't stop running. He collapsed in the muddy driveway, drenched, shaking, the camera still recording. He glanced back one last time. A faint shadow appeared in the stairwell window, tall, twisting, watching. And the whispers returned, barely audible, carried on the wind. "You can't leave. You'll come back." Jordan knew then the truth. The basement was not empty. It never would be. It never forgot. It never let go. The old building had been abandoned for more than 20 years, yet every night someone claimed to hear footsteps inside its longest hallway, an endless corridor that locals now whispered about as the Haunted Corridor. No one dared go near it after sunset. No one except Daniel Ruiz. Daniel wasn't brave, just desperate. His younger sister Mia had disappeared 2 days earlier, and the last place she was seen was near the old building. The cops had found no trace of her, no clues, no footprints, just a small fabric ribbon from her backpack lying outside the main door. Tonight, Daniel stood in front of that same entrance, the broken door hanging slightly open like a mouth inviting him in. The cold wind carried a strange metallic smell, something between rust and blood. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and whispered, "Mia, please be here." The inside was darker than he expected. Dust-covered floors, peeling wallpaper, shattered glass. But what made his stomach twist was the silence, an unnatural silence like the building was holding its breath. Ahead of him was the corridor. Long, narrow, black as pitch. Daniel stepped inside. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dust-filled air, revealing long stretches of walls covered in faded handprints. Some were small, some larger than any human should have. As he walked deeper, his footsteps echoed unnaturally, like someone else was walking in perfect rhythm with him. He froze. The echoes stopped, too. He took another step. Tap. Another echo behind him. Tap. Daniel spun around, shining the light down the hallway, but it was empty. Nothing but darkness swallowing everything behind him. His breathing grew uneven. As he continued moving forward, the corridor felt endless. Every door he passed was nailed shut, scratched from the inside as if something or someone tried to claw their way out. About halfway through, the smell changed. A faint scent of perfume. Mia's perfume. His heart pounded. He followed the smell until he reached a section of wall smeared with fresh, wet fingerprints. Small ones. "Mia?" he called. And then the lights flickered. Not the flashlight, not any electricity. The corridor itself lit up with a pale blue glow, as if something invisible had brushed against the walls. Out of instinct, Daniel turned back only to see the corridor behind him stretch farther than before. It wasn't the same distance he had walked. It was longer, much longer. The building was changing, breathing, shifting. And then he heard it, a soft voice. "Daniel." His whole body went cold. That was Mia's voice, but it didn't sound right. It was shaky, distant, almost stretched. Daniel moved faster, nearly running toward the voice. The corridor grew narrower, the walls closing in. He gasped as the floor beneath him bent, almost like something was pushing from below. The voice came again, closer. "Help me." Finally, he reached the very end of the corridor, a single door slightly open. He pushed it with shaking hands. The room inside was pitch black. "Mia!" he whispered. The smell of perfume grew stronger, and then something small brushed past his leg. He yelped and pointed the flashlight down. A ribbon! Mia's ribbon! Fresh, clean, as if placed there for him. His throat tightened. He picked it up, and the moment his fingers touched it, the corridor door slammed shut behind him. He spun around and grabbed the handle. Locked. "No! Open!" he yelled, pounding the wood. But then footsteps echoed behind him inside the room. Slow. Heavy. Uneven. Daniel lifted the flashlight. The beam trembled. A small silhouette stood in the corner. "Mia!" he whispered. The figure took one step forward. Not Mia. The thing had her shape, her tiny height, even her hair. But the face was stretched, twisted, mouth too wide, eyes too hollow, like something had worn her body like a costume. Its head tilted unnaturally. Then it whispered in Mia's voice, "You came, just like they said you would." Daniel backed away. "Where's Mia? What did you do?" The thing smiled with a mouth that tore slightly at the edges. It lifted a hand, and in its palm lay a tiny bracelet, Mia's. The corridor wanted her. Now it wants you. Before Daniel could react, the walls began to pulse, soft at first, then violently. The corridor outside groaned like a creature awakening after a long sleep. The thing rushed at him. Daniel ran for the door, rammed his shoulder into it. Once, twice. On the third try, it burst open. He stumbled into the corridor, but it wasn't the same corridor anymore. It was darker, longer, alive. Figures stood along the walls, shadow bodies, each with white, empty eyes, silent, watching. Daniel sprinted. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. Shadows moved behind him, stretching toward his feet, reaching like hands eager to drag him back. "Mia!" he screamed. A faint voice answered from somewhere ahead. Real time. "Daniel, hurry!" His heart soared. He ran faster than he had ever had until he saw her, Mia, standing near the building's exit, tears streaming down her face. He grabbed her hand and pulled her. They burst outside into the cold night air. Silence. No footsteps, no voices, no shadows, just the abandoned building behind them. Mia sobbed. "It tried to keep me. It wasn't a corridor. It was alive." Daniel hugged her tight. "We're never coming back here again." But before they could leave, the silence broke. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps echoed from behind the broken doorway. Slow, heavy, getting closer. Daniel grabbed Mia's hand tighter, and the corridor whispered one final time, "Come back. We're not done."